Vampires, werewolves, supernatural samurai, morality-driven serial killers, and even Santa Claus. Characters that imbue a cavalcade of fantasy, horror, and sci-fi storytelling that has been passed down for well over 100 years. The basic folkloric tenets of these archetypes are ever evolving, with each generation's own unique storytellers adopting it to fit their aesthetic as well as the cultural zeitgeist of their time, usually in pursuit of bringing the old into the new. The absolutes that define these characters stay the same, but the rules about the hows and whys are always meant to be broken and reshaped. And that brings us to today's episode, because we just so happen to have one of those rule-breaking, genre-bending, alternate universe-creating magicians of magical mirth, whose novels and stories have reshaped the origins of those archetypes, filling the pages with a rewritten history at once brutal and carnal, as well as downright hysterical. He leaves his readers not only thrilled and laughing, but also in deep thought about representation, revenge, and justice. So put the towel under the door and make sure it's locked, as we go full fantasy nerd out and so much more with author Steven Van Patten. You're walking in on another $5 Buzz.
Well, hello there, all you freaks, geeks, maggots, and worms. The Buzzards are here today, and we're ready to peck out your eyes and feast on your brainwaves. As there are murders of crows, we are a kettle of buzzards, and I'm joined as always with the usual carry-on craving crowd, one Mr. George Cursar, perched on his nest out in Connecticut. How goes the hunt, dear sir?
The hunt goes well. What's up, Roger? Just back from the Adirondack Mountains. Great for the soul, but happy to be back in this chair.
Well, happy to have you back, my brother. And also, we have the West Hollywood purveyor of precious prey. Lots of fancy rotten flesh out there. Mr. Peter Lynch, catch anything scrumptious today, brother?
Oh, yeah. Thank you for that, Roger.
Well, we have a hot one for you today, cats and kittens, as we dig into a horror fantasy foxhole with author Steven Van Patten. His first novel is the first of this trilogy called Brookwater's Curse, an absolute fantasy horror action nerd's fully realized wet dream. It's about a former Georgian plantation slave named Christian Brookwater, who, in the course of the first novel, becomes a vampire as part of a secret vampire law enforcement, bangs it out with werewolves, and has a bad habit of picking out racists. He also has a rare condition that makes sex with women a dangerous affair, whatever that means. The other two novels continue the legend and journeys of Mr. Christian Brookwater. Mr. Van Patten also has a 2-book series called Killer Genius about a woman serial killer who goes by direct enough, Kendra the Killer Genius. She specializes in taking out racist, sexist, ignorant assholes and career criminals in New York. Sounds like Ms. 45 without the suicide death wish. It's an Abel Ferrara film from the 80s. He also wrote a children's book called Rudy's Night Out about a young man named Rudy Brookwater. Any relation? Who sneaks out to a party and discovers a scary world out there. I've only read one of the novels, I have to tell you, Stephen, so just bear with me. I haven't had to read all of them. He co-wrote 2 metafiction novels. The first one is Hell at the Way Station with co-author Mark L. Abbott, and they followed that up with a sequel called Hell at Brooklyn T, which they co-authored with Kirk Johnson. The stories, if I'm correct, include yourselves as horror authors that must face off with demons in Brooklyn. Is that right?
That is correct.
The Hell at the Way Station won 2 African-American literary awards for Best Anthology and Best in Science Fiction. He also won an award for Best Independent Publisher for his Laughing Black Vampire Productions publishing company. He has contributed to many other short story anthologies, as a member of the New York chapter of the Horror Writers Association, wrote some TV episodes for a series called Viral Vignettes, and is a member of the DGA, go figure. You know, in his spare time, he's managed to do some stage managing. With that, I'm happy to introduce to you our beloved fellow buzzards and beautiful weirdos, acclaimed horror author, Mr. Steven Van Patten. Hello, sir, and how are you doing this fine evening?
I am fine. I cannot even, guys, really, it's like I feel so welcome. I feel so at home. I feel so just happy to be with you guys. What's happening? Pete, you look, oh my God, Yeah,
Steve, we do go back a long ways, my friend.
We go
and,
back a bit.
Yeah, man.
Quite a
And I
bit.
mean, at the inception of this whole idea of the podcast, Roger and George, these guys are, pop culture wizards. Roger's a film producer, and
Mhm.
George, knows everything from A to Z and soup to nuts, music and many other things. And, we always concentrated on and thought about Generation X and Generation X voices and how there aren't very many. And you've always stood out to me as one of those people that I've had in my life that's a Generation X voice that's strong and should have every chance to get to talk, man. So we feel very lucky to have you. So thanks for joining us.
Oh yeah, please. And yeah, I'm all about Generation X, baby. Generation X. Here we are. We were the ones that got all the abuse from the baby boomers, and then we can't abuse millennials because
I know
we can't. It's like there's like laws and shit. It's like because have you argued with a millennial? They'll be wrong as hell, and still put up like the most amazing like Simba versus Scar fight. It's like it's amazing. I don't even bother personally. But,
yeah, man. I mean, our generation, for all of its great artistic contributions to the world, it's time to step up, I think, and make these voices known and fight the better fight.
Anyway, so get back to you as a young man sitting there in Fort Greene, Brooklyn, and you decide what is the inclination? What's the start, the beginnings of your obsession with the all things horror?
Well, it was a bunch of stuff, and I think it starts with the fact that my mother at one point was kind of a horror fan, so she'd have different Christopher Lee horror stuff on, because we always had like back in the day we had like Creature Feature and Chiller and all those sort of like packaged
Commander USA. Do you remember
Yeah.
the USA?
Yes,
it was
yes.
movie, and then it was a horror movie on like Saturday afternoon, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you had that kind of like prepackaged stuff, and as a kid, you're just kind of sitting there watching it. And I, early on, I kind of was one of these kids that was kind of very much into escapism. So, you throw a sci-fi thing on, you throw a horror thing on. It's like, hear from me from like, whatever. And, and it just got to the point where I literally was like sneaking around to try to watch horror movies. And the thing is, my mother, God bless her, she worked nights. So, I would sneak up and continue to watch horror stuff in the middle of the night. And of course, I'd have nightmares and things like that. And of course, I toughened up eventually. And it was funny because my stepfather would be there with me when my mother was working, but he's a drunk. So he never really like busted me or anything like that. So I would sit there, watch Kolchak the Night Stalker in my room. And he'd have, as long as the thing I had to do was I had to just put a towel under like by the bedroom door so you don't see the lights or whatever, and then just kind of stay close to the TV, and and then I listen and like, oh, okay, bet. And then I'd go to bed, have nightmares, and then go to school. That was kind of my routine, like wash, rinse, repeat. But as I got older, it started to kind of come to me that with my love of horror and science fiction and movies in general, I was falling in love with something that didn't necessarily love me back. And so the idea to sit down and actually write something and create my own personal mythos, or if you will, that had been something that kind of instilled in me like as a child. I think it was kind of in the back of my mind by 10. And on top of that, I was also like a heavy reader. I had discovered Stephen King by a certain point. And I remember because full disclosure, I mean, I was a straight up nerd. That's why was one of the reasons why I never ended up getting in the drug game and all this other shit, because I had already kind of established myself as this like nice kid that reads a lot. I'm like Cuba Gooding Jr. in Boys in the Hood. It's like you're on your way to killing somebody and you're like, Steve, get out of the car. It's like that's who I was. But real talk. So like I just remember this one English class. The English teacher was like, all right, if you're done with the test, just put it on the desk Don't say anything, but just sit at your desk and do whatever you want to do. So I finished the test way ahead of everybody else. Here's the test, whatever. So I'm sitting there reading The Shining. Now I'm 12, and of course there's parts of that are going over my head, but this is what I wanted to do. She said I could do whatever I wanted to do. So I'm sitting there and I'm reading Shining, and she's literally like walking by, making sure nobody's cheating on the test. So she's like, deek, 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 deek. And then she's like, deek, 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 deek. And then she's looking back at me and she's like, what are you reading? And I'm in my, my sarcastic ass is like, The Shining, what does it look like? Right. And she's like, and you understand it? And I did I understand it? Maybe, but the thing was, yes, this is what I'm reading. Yes, I understand it. It's fine. So what does she do? She goes ahead, and after the test is over, and she goes into this whole thing about how I'm so different from everybody else, and I'm so this and I'm so that, and da 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 da. And then pretty much after that, I needed a date planner for everybody that wanted to fight at 3:00 at this point, because now I've showed everybody else up in the class or whatever the fuck. Oh my God. So I kind of started keeping that stuff to myself after a while. And, and also, like girls back then, they didn't want to talk about all this stuff. And, if you're trying to meet girls, you're going to have to talk about other things. So I kept it to myself, and I went through school, did my thing. And then I ended up working at MTV, and I always wanted to pursue writing, but the doors weren't opening the way I wanted them to. But somehow I caught a couple of lucky breaks in the TV production world. I ended up being a stage manager, and now I'm stage managing. But as Pete will tell you, stage managing isn't really a creative thing. It's more a logistical thing with personality juggling, and look, here's the thing, I don't need you to be mad, but I need you to stand here, and and all that shit, and it's not creatively satisfying. So somewhere between my episodes of going out drinking with coworkers like Pete, I decided I was going to start writing my stuff, and I went ahead and I just started spending night after night after night, just working out, like you said, the vampire series, and it just kind of took over from there.
Would you call that like late 90s, maybe like early
That's exactly it. Yeah, that's exactly.
Because I remember as when we first met, you had just maybe started, putting the time in, I feel like, and then it was a few years after that when you released a book, and I just remember being like, just feeling like how in juggling this career in New York City and getting that done. How do you do it? It was incredible, to be honest with you, just to see
thanks.
Someone get that whole other thing done. And now to where it's gotten to, you're publishing your own stuff. You're publishing other people's stuff. It's pretty amazing, man. You've come a long way with all that from that moment, and in a pretty short amount of time too, if you think about it.
Yeah, relatively. Considering that I still stage manage. I still pick up a show here and there, and the one funny thing about stage managing also is that you can be the greatest stage manager of all time, but if you're on shows that consistently get canceled, you still have to kind of, like if you have a cat and you're like, you do the whole laser thing with the cat, that's kind of like how I am with TV shows. It's like I'm just following the little laser that fate kind of like, makes me do. But so it's funny, speaking of publishing other people's things, so you remember Ray Muntz?
Yeah.
So Ray, who was yet another person of color who wasn't exactly having the greatest time in the world at MTV, he and I kept in touch, and he was a VJ. He's very ill-fated VJ in that respect, but he's still making a life for himself and everything else like that. And one of the things he decided to do was become an expert on growing cannabis.
Really?
Yes. So if you happen to go tooling through my website, you'll see a book entitled, has absolutely nothing to do with horror, and it's entitled Growth, the Basics of Our Gardens. But there's a big old cannabis leaf on the cover, which so it's a very innocuous title, but the cover is like, by the way, motherfucker, this is what this book is actually about. And it's basically an instructional manual on growing weed. And there's a chapter written by him, and there's another chapter written by another weed growing aficionado by the name of Jacob Pisano. And it was funny because Ray was pestering me, as Ray does, and he was like, yeah, I want to put this book together. I think we got to do this SVP, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, Ray, here's the thing. If I publish the book, I get a cut of the money. I could just tell you how to do this. And see, I was trying to be ethical because, to be completely honest with you, when I started the serial killer series, I had a guy step to me who I met through the Horror Writers Association, who was like, "Oh, I'll publish your serial killer book," and da 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 da. And what does he do? He basically just throws it up on Kindle, and he ends up getting a whole bunch of money. And Killer Genius actually was like nominated for an African American Literary Award. It to date, I believe it's my bestseller. I let somebody else take all the money. So, and then he gets out of the publishing game completely. And then what do I have to do? I have to come up with different ISBN numbers, and I have to republish and recover and do all this other stuff. And that's when I was kind of like, you know what? I don't trust people anymore.
Yeah.
That's when I was kind of done with the whole what other writers do, just constantly pursuing all these contracts and things like that. I was like, you know what, I'm just for my own peace of mind, and just for the fact that I need my money to come to me. It's like that's why I now have things set up the way I have set up. But Ray, as I have now experienced that, I am trying to tell Ray, hey, you know what? I am your friend. So here's the thing. I can actually give you the instructions. You can go ahead and self-publish this yourself. And he was like, no, you can have the money. I just want, he was just so like, whatever. So I was like, okay, all right, I'll do it. I'll publish a weed book while they're legalizing this shit. I got no problem with that.
I mean, what's awesome about that is, though, for one thing, that's congratulations, because that's great, and good for Ray for going with someone who's put the work in, put the time in. I mean, your grind doesn't quit, man. I mean, it's not a night I don't see you're on a podcast. You're out there doing readings. You're out there doing all kinds of events and all kinds of things constantly, man. So that you've deciphered the world of publishing and self-published and get that going for you, you deserve every single thing that comes to you as a result, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, come on, man.
Now, some of that, I have to admit, some of that is actually guidance from the Horror Writers Association. I have to. So what happened while I was still struggling with a shiesty publisher, and I was 3 books deep into Brookwater's Curse and everything else like that, I ended up it was a timing thing. It was like the New York chapter of the Horror Writers Association was trying to like pick themselves back up after some kind of scandal or some other craziness. I'm not really even privy to, but there was like some membership issues or something like that. But then they had this new coordinator, this guy, James Chambers, great guy. And I stepped to him and I was like, look, I got this going on, this going on, this going on. I know it's not a traditional, publishing thing. I know I'm not like, H.P. Lovecraft or, anybody like that. But he was like, yeah, sure. And we went over it and he was like, okay, you're in. So then I join, and then I show up at these meetings. And one of the things that they immediately were talking about was anthologies. And it's like, look, it's great that you jumped ahead and did this vampire series. You've got this serial killer thing happening and you've got all this stuff going on, but nobody really knows who the hell you are. So what we want to do is we want to start you doing some short stories. Then, you'll audition those short stories in different people's anthologies. And that's where your name will get out, because what'll happen is if you're, good, good enough, right place, right time, right fits, whatever, your story gets in an anthology with somebody who's more well-known than you are. and then people discover you.
Yeah.
And that, to be completely honest, has been a huge thing. And then we started doing events. Now,
Mhm.
the thing about the events is, I mean, writers do this kind of thing all the time, where it's like you get like 3 or 4 guys together in a coffee house, or some like kind of dive bar or whatever, with a little mini stage. It's like, all right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Horror Writers Association. First up, we're going to have blah blah blah, and he's going to read blah blah blah, and then the people switch on and off the stage. When they explained to me what they wanted to do, it's like, then I actually turned it around and turned it into my TV bag, and I said, how about if I DJ the event? And they were like, what? Because, well, to be completely honest, it's like, outside of myself and Mark Abbott, it's the only people of color in the meeting, and they're like, DJ the event. And then I tried to explain what I basically want to do is, because I have a little tractor deck, and the thing is, I'm not trying to front like I'm Master Flex or somebody, it's like, but I can look, and I also, because I was kind of a party boy, I hung with DJs. I kind of, so I can kind of blend and mix and go through different genres and shit like that. All
Sure.
right, so it's just it's just a little something I picked up, and I'm like, look, I have an idea. So basically what it is the event would start, doors open. You understand this, Pete? Doors open. So you let the people that are coming here to readers, they come sit down, they order their drinks and whatever. But instead of like silence or the radio or some other nonsense, I'm actually playing music, which has always been hilarious, because I remember this one time I actually, I think it was in the Lovecraft bar, which doesn't exist anymore. So what I would do, I play load-in music, basically, right?
Yeah, sure.
And then we start, and and what I would do sometimes is I would have a microphone as well. So I'd say something to the effect of, "Welcome to the New York chapter of the Horror Writers Association Galactic Terrors event, brought to you by the New York chapter of the Horror Writers Association and Count Chocula cereal. Now give it up." And then I bring the MC on, I play like the theme from Hellraiser or some shit like that. And then he, and then that goes back to, the regular thing. But then as each reader comes up, I play music. I play them on and off, so it's like, depending on what their style is, because everybody would have a different style. So like for Mark Abbott, for example, I would play like the theme from Psycho or something like that. And, it's like whoever it is. Now it's a little tricky when it's time for me to read. Because of course nobody else knows how to operate the equipment.
Like, hey, could you forget it?
Right, exactly. So they introduced me, and I was like, so the last time we did this, of course, was like a couple of months before COVID kicked in, and I actually played for myself the theme from the latest Godzilla movie.
Nice.
Like, dun, 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 and then I just cut it off real quick and run up on stage, and then I read my bit, and there's no closing music for me, but it's fine, because the way they usually put me in the lineup is when there's an intermission anyway, so it's like, all right, go get a drink. So we got to the point where we were really in a groove with that, and then COVID.
Oh,
and the thing is we've got a couple of people in the New York chapter, high risk as hell. So It was like, well, guess we're staying, and so we were doing Zoom meetings, and we've been doing Zoom shows.
Yeah.
We've been doing all that stuff. So we kept it pushing, but what was a little messed up, of course, was just the fact that, I had actually, just before COVID, I had just re-upped the supply of all my books. And now I'm literally sitting on a stack of books. There's books at my mother's back in Fort Greene. It's like, I was like, oh, okay, so when is COVID going to be over? Because I need to get to a horror writing convention because I'm tripping over books. So that was kind of a drag.
But you changed the game with those events. I mean, I remember there was an Irish bar over on, what was it, 45th? You guys started doing that even earlier on, even with the DJ. I remember just as I was even leaving, because you guys you started doing that, and it just built up and built up and built up. I mean, what a way to change the game just to get yourself even recognized back then. It's awesome,
Yeah. I
Well done.
wanna I kind of, when we get back full circle, I kind of want to introduce it on a bigger scale, or maybe because there's horror writers association chapters in like every major city in the country. So I almost want to be like, all right, well, let me get my wannabe DJ horror writer dudes, and let's all sit down, and then you guys can make your stuff as exciting as this New York shit is, because
Yeah.
y'all don't know what you're missing. Yeah.
Dude, that's a fantastic idea.
Hey, so ask me real quick. So when you're growing up and you're and you're watching movies, I mean, what are the 5 or 6 that really stuck out for you that made you want to actually? I mean, when was the hit on the head that made you really want to focus on it?
It was more than a couple. It was more than a couple hits on the head. But we'll start with Blackula and Scream, Blackula, Scream. Now I realize these movies do not hold up from a technical standpoint, but the sheer significance of those movies to me, first of all, is William Marshall's performance. William Marshall playing Mama Walde, aka Blackula. What was that?
What's that, Raj?
Shakespearean actor.
Yes, exactly. And he brought such dignity to that part, as otherwise campy as it may have turned out, that even at like, I don't know, was I 7, 8, something like that when I saw that movie, that always stuck with me. And there were some lines in there that were just like, it was just incredible. Like there's one scene in Scream, Blackula, Scream where he's kind of like walking and he's propositioned by a prostitute, and he kind of dismisses it because he already just bit somebody, and he's like, get out of here. And then he gets cornered by these 2 pimps, and he's trying to explain to them, guys, I'll fuck you up, like, get out of here, right? And then he finally ends up saying something to the effect of, and I'm going to screw it up, but it's something to the effect of, all you're doing is emulating your former slave masters, and you've made your sister a slave. And that, and what clicked off in my head there was that, oh, I can make social commentary in horror. Oh, snap. And that right there. So those 2 you got right there.
Comedy, horror, you could sneak that right in.
Yeah. How about that? I'll say another one, Jaws.
Yeah.
Because Jaws was, and I know I'm going off a little bit, because it's like Jaws is, first of all, any debate that Jaws is not a horror movie, it's like, please get out of here.
Full on horror.
It's right. It's and it's not even so much about the whole thing about a beach being terrorized. It's these 3 very different men who go after the shark. And it almost becomes this, like, as a little kid, you're kind of like, well, who do I want to be in this scenario? You know what I mean? Do I want to be the really gruff, like, mind you, he's fun. Robert Shaw's performance in this movie is freaking amazing. But right. Then, for all his expertise, all his bluster, he still ends up dead. Richard Dreyfuss, on the other hand, the smartest guy in the room, technically. But he ends up having to hide in the ocean floor until Roy Scheider shoots the thing. And that's like the luckiest, like, it's like, oh, so we got the oxygen tank in the shark's mouth. He shoots the oxygen tank. I mean, in a way, it's complete BS, but the way it's done is like, just makes up for the fact that it's BS,
Because of the success of The Exorcist, studios were really first time looking at a horror movie, was essentially really just a monster movie.
Mm-hmm.
And, putting, even though he was a young man, Spielberg, they still put a lot of money behind that film. They, the shooting schedule way past.
Oh, yeah.
Way over budget and blah, blah, blah. But, you sort of, what's different than so many other movies is that it has a studio behind it. They pumped in the big, and that happens all the time now. But back then, that was rare to have a film and that caliber of filmmaker and that group of people to come together. It wasn't until The Shining was really the next one that had, or The Omen also had a big studio element to it too. Before it had a major filmmaker to give it a sort of like, what's the word I'm looking for? A sort of class that a lot of films, genre films, end up being in sort of a basement. Even though that's where all the best stuff actually grows. That's where
Yes.
best ideas come from. That's where film noir came from. That's where Italian neorealism came from. It was from films that were on the off the beaten path, or underneath the radar.
Yes.
And Jaws was not one of them. It certainly brought everything out. Psycho too, but Psycho was a lurid mellow. Was a very lurid black and white movie that he made with a television crew, and ended up creating, essentially reinventing horror from the Get Out, 1960, and that didn't even happen again until 13 years later. With
So where were we? Three.
So we've got Blackula Scream, and then Jaws.
What year is that one? I know Jaws is I know.
Yes, 1972 was the first.
72. Wow.
Yeah. It was their craze.
So
Frankenstein was not good.
Yeah. Well. Speaking of The Exorcist, so The Exorcist is one of the few things that, it still holds water to this day. Granted, the beginning's a little slow, I think, for today's audiences.
You think so?
But just thinking kids, now they're so, there's so much instant gratification. It's like, the second you start like some sort of like Fast and the Furious or a Transformers movie, it's like something being blown up like almost in like 3 frames in, which doesn't diminish The Exorcist for me. I'm just saying, from a generational standpoint. But I love The Exorcist, and The Exorcist scared the shit out of me as a kid. But it didn't scare me, but so much because when I was watching The Exorcist, full disclosure, I did cover my face a few times, so I didn't really, the funny thing is I didn't really get the full effect of The Exorcist until I was in college. And I was in college, and I was actually in charge of the audiovisual center at night. And for whatever reason, Long Island University had a big old satellite dish. And that was strange because we had access to everything. And we had this dean, Joe Slade. Probably shouldn't say his name, but he's probably dead now. But the point is, so Slade was actually working on some sort of dissertation about porn. So every once in a while I'm working in the office, I turn the TV on, and The Devil and Miss Jones would just suddenly pop up, or Vanessa Del Rio, and it's like, oh wow, he was doing some sort of thesis. Like, and he needed the audiovisual department to record all these movies. So it's like it wouldn't be that often that I get a chance to get to the satellite dish. And this one night that we weren't recording anything for Dr. Slade, and I saw that The Exorcist was on, but it was well after hours, well after the audiovisual stuff was done and whatever. But I said, you know what, fuck it. I got the keys. I got the burglar code. Security knows me. I'm just going to stay out, hang out, and watch this movie. So there I am in the basement of the Library Learning Center at Long Island University, all by myself. And it's midnight. And movie starts. And I'm just sitting, and I'm just watching, and I'm just watching. And then just as she gets to the part where she's throwing this guy around, and it's let Jesus, that part, a mouse runs right across the room, like literally 6 inches away from my feet. He sees me, I see him. We both fucking panic. It's a mess. Nobody saw it. Me, but it's just, it's just the fact that happened, and I didn't have a heart attack, and
oh god,
go to the afterlife for that.
I don't know if I would have survived something like that.
I had the Z channel in my bedroom as a kid in Rancho Cucamonga when I was living there for a brief period of time. The Z channel was a great channel back in the day, and mostly out here in California. It was the most fantastic programming. And my parents told me to go to bed that night. Absolutely do not watch this movie. They'd let me watch anything.
Mm.
That was around 1978. So I'd have been 9 years of age. So of course I turn on the TV and the first thing I see is her masturbating with the crucifix and putting her mother's face in her lap. And she's, fuck her. And then, she does throw her across the room. And I walk out to the living room and I'm pale as a ghost. My mom looks at my dad and she said, I told you not to put that fucking TV in the room. Because I just couldn't help myself, man.
Oh man.
But that was the thing about The Exorcist, right? It was like the more you heard about it as a little kid, the more you were like, wait, what's going on? And yeah.
Would you guys consider that probably the scariest movie? I mean, is that the scariest movie? The Exorcist?
No, but it scared a lot of people.
I maybe top 3 ever.
All right.
I mean, it's certainly a powerful film to watch with an audience too.
Yeah.
Just watch them on a roller coaster ride.
But Texas Chainsaw would be my pick.
That's a great one.
That's a good pick.
Fantastic film.
That's a good pick.
My personal favorite horror film is Night of the Living Dead for certain reasons. I'm a big George Romero fan, and it's all very film noir. Anyway, so you got your Jaws. You said The Exorcist, and what else? Did you read a lot too as a kid?
Poured through a lot of Stephen King stuff. Yeah.
You read
Definitely.
Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula?
Oh yeah. I actually insisted on doing it for English class at one point because there was one of those English teachers like, well, you can choose this, you can choose that. Da, 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 da. I was like, all right, Dracula, thank you, good night.
It's also kind of a prerequisite if you're going to write a book about vampires.
Right. Yeah, of course.
At least like the rules to know what to break, right?
Exactly.
And then, yeah, I mean, but you said that I was reading something that you were talking to somebody else about The Shining and how much the film version, when you saw it as a kid, sort of disappointed you. I think you went with your mother.
Yes. That's a story. Like, yeah.
That the character that he played was the hero in the novel, as we know.
He's right. Exactly.
Not so much in the movie.
Yeah, he was kind of a sacrificial lamb in it. So, all right. So, I don't feel like I necessarily am spoiling this for anybody, but apologies if I am. So in the novel version of The Shining, there is a black man who bonds with the little boy whose dad is destined to lose his shit and start, chasing them around that big old winter resort with an axe. And yes, that's right, Dick Halloran. And so in the book, he shows up and he basically rescues the wife and child, which is a stark contrast to what happens in the movie, thanks to Stanley Kubrick. Now, I should double back just to say, and I bet you probably already know this story, Roger. When they were making The Shining, Stephen King and Stanley Kubrick weren't exactly seeing eye to eye on things. Matter of fact, there's a documentary, I forget the name of the documentary, but there's a whole thing that somebody put together that basically illustrates how many times Stanley Kubrick says fuck you to Stephen King. Little things that, Stephen King would probably see and be like, this mother, as he's watching the movie, like pure jabs at Stephen King.
Documentary Room 237, is it?
I think that's it. I think yes.
Rodney Asher is a friend of mine.
Oh, wow. Well, there you go. So all these little fuck yous, and of course the big fuck you is so first of all, the fact that Scatman Crothers was cast as opposed to Richard Roundtree or somebody who looks like they could throw a punch. The fact that like as a kid, I should have, it's like I obviously I'm not the older cynical TV person that I am now. I know something about show business, or else I would have already smelled a rat. But at the time, I read the book. I was excited to see, black man save the day and all this. And I talked my mother and my Aunt Patsy into taking me to see this movie. We were talking two older black women from Alabama who really did not appreciate having to watch Scatman Crothers take an axe in the chest and then proceeded to give me the blues all the way home. So, needless to say, a seed of resentment was planted that day. And that's, in terms of, as much as I love vampire movies, as much as I love horror in general, as much as I'm a fan of horror science fiction and everything, as much as I'm a fan of everything, one of the things that really set me off was the shit I got that night as I was coming home from The Shining.
What is it about Stephen King movies? They're either really
Perfect,
good or
they're
they're horrible.
or they're horrible.
They can't get the stand right. I didn't see this last one, but I heard it was horrible as well.
Yeah,
that book's amazing.
It's like, I'm not quite sure what it is. I honestly think it's just tough to break down his shit in 2 hours.
Yeah.
It just is, because there's layers, that you just, I think, it gets to the point where reading the book actually helps prepare you for the movie, but then, it's just not enough sometimes. And so, speaking of Stephen King, one last little note about my poor mother. Like I said, she started off as a horror fan, because we watched all these old Hammer, Peter Cushing chasing Christopher Lee around, and and all that. Like, we watched all of that together. My mother, I believe, between that night with The Shining and honestly, Salem's Lot, my mother kind of checked out after that. She's never, outside of reading my stuff, she has no interest in horror whatsoever. And I, if I'm not entirely mistaken, I think it was little Ralphie Glick, vampire Ralphie Glick, scratching at that bedroom window to get his brother. I think my mother was done after that. I think that was it, because her reaction was just kind of like, and then she's looking at me like, should I be letting you watch this? It's like she was done. And she was done. She, like, I go over there right now and be like, hey mom, you want to watch da-da-da? She's like, no. So she's outside of reading my stuff, because she, she's very supportive that way. But outside of that, no, she's done. It's a wrap.
My own dad won't watch my own movies because he hates horror movies. So there you go. It's the same thing. He hates them too. And even Pete doesn't even like horror films that much.
I struggle with them. I do.
Yeah, no, we talked about that back in the day.
Oh yeah.
Like, I don't know, SVP. Like, yeah.
Well, listen, SVP, we've been going a little bit. We typically take a quick little break, which I think we're going to do right now. And if you indulge us for another like 15, 20 after that, we want to talk to you just about a few more things, if that's cool with you. I know we're going over a little bit, but we still got a little bit more to get to, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, it's all good. I ain't got a curfew. Come on.
Be right back.
Hey, we have a quick favor to ask. We want to get the word out, and the way to help is for you to subscribe to us on either Apple or Spotify. And it would be really huge if you give us a rating and a review. Much love.
And we're back, Pete. Thank you for the reload. Have the citrus spray in my hand. SVP, I was reading a little bit about your preparation as you went into starting the first book of the trilogy, I believe it was. And I know that you spent some time in Osaka, Japan. As far as I understand it, there really is not much of vampire folklore or any type of stories in the Japanese culture. So, what was the trip? What was your motivation for trying to bring some elements from Japan into the storyline?
Well, I think I was, to be completely honest with you, I was kind of being greedy. I had, and along with my horror movies and everything else like that, I had discovered Akira Kurosawa.
I'd never heard of him.
He's never heard of him. And nothing would surprise me more. It's like, please. So I had just discovered Akira Kurosawa. I had just seen the movie Ron, and I had also actually been studying kendo a few years prior. So I mean, unfortunately, I didn't really get to stick with it because then MTV kind of took over my life. But you know, bills first, right? You know, it's like you learn how to sword fight later. So I kind of had all this other stuff in my head about, you know, giving my main character a samurai friend, and I came up with this whole thing that actually. And conveniently in the first book, I just kind of borrowed a page from the people who make Godzilla movies, and I just, you know, created this like secluded island where he ended up, and then he met these vampire samurais, where Christian Brookwater meets these vampire samurais. And excuse me. So in the second book, I decided that we were going to have a fight in Japan. And I had already, in the first book, I had actually already visited Senegal to stage a large part of the climax of the first book in Senegal. Now, the funny thing about that was, you know, so you're up in the way hours of the night, in the morning, and whatever. And I came up with this whole plot twist where this Senegalese werewolf was now going to kidnap this woman who has a child. She was going to kidnap the child of this woman who had rejected him, and he's going to take her to Senegal. And he's going to force her and these vampires and everybody else to come rescue this kid. And I remember being very satisfied with myself as I was finally going to bed to get my 4 hours of sleep before I have to be with Pete over at MTV. And then a voice, just as I'm about to fall asleep, a voice clicks off in my head and says, "Hey, dummy, you've never been to Africa before. How are you supposed to finish this story?" And it was like the whole, all right, I'll figure something out. And then I'm telling, because this wasn't something I was sharing with everybody, especially in the early phase. But the few people I did say something to, they were like, "Dude, just go to Jamaica. Like, what's the matter with you?" You know, and everybody was like getting all pissy with me and whatever. And I was like, and you know, and I was a younger man then, so I was very much no, artistic integrity, blah, 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 blah. And so I insisted on doing this. And then finally, a mutual friend of ours, Pete, Sanji, who was taking an African dancing class, he was one of our Chiron operators at the time. She suggested I tag along with this drumming and dancing class that was going to Senegal.
Wow.
And it, you know, it seemed cost effective at the time, and that turned out to be a lie. And I'll explain that in a second. But okay, so I get to the airport. I don't know any of these people. I don't even know what the name of this airline is that I've never heard of before. I get on this plane, and it's full of people in kente cloth, and it's awesome. And we fly, we go past all the guys with the mirrored sunglasses and the old school M16s, and we get to this dude's house, and they literally spend 2 weeks just trying to rip us off. It was bananas, but it was, you know what, but I still got stuff out of it because, you know, there were still classes happening. It's just that with the classes, everybody just kind of had their hand out. Hey, are you going to need these sunglasses when you go back to America? You know, like that kind of shit.
Oh,
you
man.
know, you'd be eating dinner and guys would literally walk into the house trying to sell you stuff. It was like, you know, it was a little much, but this is sort of like an exaggerated version of what New York does to tourists. You know, it's like we catch you at the store. You know, the people trying to separate you from your money literally follow you around. And everything was up for grabs. everything was up for grabs. I use a very specific hair pomade, and the lady of the house happened to notice the jar of hair pomade while I was, fixing myself up one morning, and it's like, can I borrow the hair pomade? And I was like, sure, whatever. All right, I figure she's just gonna whatever. A few hours later, I notice every woman within like a mile radius is laced up all of a sudden. Like, was there a party going on today?
Oh,
Like,
man.
what's going on? Right? Like my dumb ass is like, I didn't put it together. It's like I had literally one jar of hair pomade basically like changed the whole scene, the whole village. And then I go back the next morning, hey, I'm trying to do my hair here. There was literally this much left in the jar. I was like, she sat up here and really like, she hooked the whole neighborhood up with the hair. That was like bananas. But regardless of all that, the inconveniences and everything, the what I wrote would not be as crisp. It wouldn't have the locations. I would not have thought to use this one lighthouse that I found. There was just so much authenticity that the trip allowed that it totally made, all the inconveniences, all the like stupid stuff, and it made everything worth it, including the malaria medication, which I later found out army guys were like shooting themselves in the head when they were taking it, and it's just like,
Oh,
and I remember,
God.
what the funny part about that was when the doctor, before I was leaving, the doctor was like, so this malaria medication makes people depressed. And of course, my flipping ass was like, I work in television, bring it. It's all good. And then come to find out, as I'm at the tail end of the prescription, because the thing is, you have to keep taking it even when you get back.
Really?
At least that was the case back then. I'm sure by now they've adjusted these things. And I'm in a car with the woman I'm dating at the time, and we're driving around, and this report comes on, and it's about the medicine I have been taking for the past month, and it's literally about army dudes killing themselves. And I'm like, no wonder I feel so bad. Oh, okay. But it was, at this point, it was like the last, I had like 2 pills left. Like,
Did you finish?
No, I didn't. I was like, you know what? Let's let the malaria kill me if that's what's going to happen.
Oh, man.
Awesome, man.
But, the Senegalese trip, of course, spawned, okay, I should go to Japan if I'm going to, stay true to what I'm doing here. And I know for a fact, and now that, with you sitting right here looking at me right now, Pete, I remember you were like probably the first person I talked to right after I bought the tickets, because I bought them in the computer in the bullpen that MTV used to have, and then I walk out and there you are. Hey, what are you doing, SVP? I'm like, oh, I'm making plans to go to Japan, and you were all psyched and everything like that. So that's kind of funny.
I do. I absolutely remember that. I also remember. Yeah, absolutely remember you planning that trip. Yeah, amazing.
That was good beat.
Yeah.
I also remember you went to Deadwood.
Yes.
Some years later too.
That was another thing. That was another thing.
You might say it's not worth it or whatever, but you have been to the locations that you care about. You've done your work. That cannot be taken away from you as far as that goes, man. Come on.
Yeah. No, well, the Deadwood thing was really like sort of like a side note, because I love Westerns, so getting to see Deadwood in person, certainly had its, nostalgic value, and visiting Wild Bill Hickok's grave and Calamity Jane's grave and all that other stuff. But the real reason I was in South Dakota was to actually go to Wounded Knee.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Now, so the funny thing about that trip, it's like, I was kind of like, okay, I'm going to South Dakota. I'm going by myself. I'm Black. Let's see. Let me hire somebody to sort of like, and the thing is, it's like the South Dakota trip, I was more paranoid than anything else, just because, I don't know who I'm running into, and that kind of thing. So I ended up hiring this very nice lady who is, she's a tour guide. But she, when we were speaking before I got out there, she was kind of like, well, I'm really used to people who just want to see Mount Rushmore and go whitewater rafting. Like, what exactly are you trying to do? And I'm like, I want to go to Wounded Knee. I want to see different points of interest from like when the Sioux were disenfranchised, and there's some museums and stuff like that. And that's when she figured, I would want to see Deadwood. I'm like, sure, I'd love to see Deadwood. That'd be great. But the main focus was Wounded Knee, because it was incorporating Wounded Knee, oddly enough, in the same damn book that has the whole Japan thing, because the South Dakota thing was kind of like a flashback. So so she did a great job of picking places for us to visit. But things kind of hit ahead, because we end up visiting this campus. It's called Oglala State University, and it was a campus basically inhabited by Lakota Sioux college kids. And there was an exhibit, and you know how you go to a museum and they give you some headphones and you go from exhibit to exhibit, point A, B, and you have a little something to listen to, and you kind of work your way around the room. So the whole thing was really a full-on breakdown of what the U.S. government did to the American Indians in general, but primarily to the Lakota Sioux. And so it's kind of funny as we as a nation now argue whether or not we're going to have critical race theory in schools and things like that. Because, okay, so I had done a significant amount of reading on Wounded Knee, so I knew most of this going in as we're walking through the museum exhibit. And you go through the then they moved the reservation over here, then moved over here, the smallpox blankets. Yeah, we knock all that down, and then the last thing, crazy enough, is us sitting down in this little mini theater while they show us what's basically U.S. soldiers putting the Lakota Sioux that they killed right after the Wounded Knee massacre into a mass grave.
My God.
And the fact that there's footage left of that was amazing, because I didn't know that. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my God. And you see the leaders, you see Red Cloud and a few others, and they're being put in this mass grave. Lights come on. What's that?
That's the visual of a lot of genocides. That's usually a mark of a lot of that. I'm just thinking of the Shadows and Fog and the films that are about the Holocaust. Very similar.
Yes.
Homicidal maniacs tend to put people into big mass graves with
no. But what was telling, lights come on, and it's a very somber moment, but my guide, she was like, I need a minute. And she ran out to the parking lot and was gone for a while. And now I'm like, I'm in the middle of South Dakota by myself. Better go out to the parking lot and see what's going on. I get out there. She's full on bawling, just crying.
First time she had seen this, isn't it?
Born and raised in South Dakota, knew none of what she had just learned. And now I'm trying to comfort her. I just met her like 4 hours ago. So I'm like, hey, all right. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, all right. I know it's terrible. And, we talked it down. We got back in the car and, we talked, politics in general after that for a little bit. I go home. We remain Facebook friends, and we kind of trade jokes back and forth here and there. And then we stopped talking so much. But then she reaches out to me at one point, and she's like, yeah, check out the website. I've made some changes with the company. I divorced my husband. I got this new guy and blah, 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 blah. I was like, oh, this is all great, right? I go to the website, come to find out that she has now hired a Lakota Sioux woman to help explain that part of stuff as they go from site to site to site. So she actually ended up changing her whole thing based on what she saw that day. And I was like, wow.
In a
good on you,
North Dakota, you enacted change for real. Yeah, that's a wild story. Did you for your other novels, wait, tell me a little bit about the metafiction books. What is the notion about you guys going around being demon chasers with Ghostbusters and shit? What are you guys doing?
Okay, so first of all, I full disclosure. I mean, I'm the publisher of record. I wrote a significant amount of what's in those books, but this was not my original idea. Let me tell you what happened. So, like I said, Mark Abbott, who I met through the Horror Writers Association, turns out he only lives a few minutes away from me and the whole thing. So, we become fast buddies real quick, and and he likes to shoot little short movies. He actually cast me as a vampire in one of them. Surprise. And so we're like mad cool. So we've started like drinking together. I know Pete's amazed at that. So one night, well, we're particularly inebriated. He goes on about how he keeps submitting these short stories. Because remember what I said, the Horror Writers Association, the guidance for everybody was like, get those short stories in those anthologies, build that brand, that's how you do it, right? So I guess he had just gotten rejected a few times and he's drunk and he was like, hey, we should just put the story out anyway, because right. And I'm like, and I'm whatever. Yeah, sure, we can buy this bar. It's like, it's fine. Yeah, let's go. And then sober up, realize what I agreed to, and then we circle back, we talk about it, and it's like, all right, this is what we'll do. And we came up with the framework of actually having a little bit adventure inside of the bar, which was named the Way Station. The Way Station, of course, has now been a victim of COVID. It no longer exists. But we did this whole thing where it's like we have this adventure, and it's kind of like the tough guy versions of ourselves. And it was funny because like he was actually in charge of kind of putting the climax together. And then when I read what he wrote, I was like, oh hell, I'm gonna have to start lifting weights because people are gonna like be looking, because I'm in the climax, like I'm full on like pa pa pa. It's like, yeah, giving them the 2-piece, and I was like, yeah, wait, oh wow, okay, all right, let's do it. But along that we have, so it's like the adventure, and then sort of intersecting into that we have these short stories that we wrote that have nothing to do with that adventure. I think a lot of people got a kick out of Naughty, which is it's basically about an incubus. If you know what a succubus is, an incubus is kind of like the male version. It's like a sex demon, but this one pretends it's Santa Claus, and that's how it meets women.
And that's what you sent me. You sent me the reading, right?
And whatever. Yes. I sent you that reading.
That was absolutely hilarious.
So
man.
This incubus, well, the crowd got a good kick out of it. And the thing is, it's like, so he's confronted by this guy whose wife he's had sex with, and things go left for the guy real bad. So it's a few stories like that. So what ended up happening, that like you said in the intro, we won some awards. It was kind of a nice thing, and it was a great night. I got my sexy jacket on. It was a good time. So then when that happens, you're like, well, all right, you got to come up with a sequel. What are we doing, right? And since at that point, now we've got a podcast, Beef, Wine, and Shenanigans, and it's the three of us. It's me, Mark, and this other guy that works in television, Kirk Johnson. And, and that kind of, the thing about our podcast, it started off as the three of us just breaking down, horror, science fiction, and Marvel shit, but, through the lens of, old African-American cats, right? Not old, but you know what I'm saying. And then Trump got elected, and then it started becoming like a group therapy session, because we kept having to wrestle with all this stuff that was happening. And now we've kind of embraced it. So it's like, we'll talk we'll talk down The Boys, or I like Batman Long Halloween or something like that, and then we'll switch and we'll play a game. It's like the latest one that I've come up with is Name That Racist.
I saw that.
And I ask questions. I ask questions, and they have to figure out, what racist I'm talking about. And it's just a gag. It's just for fun. It makes a horrible thing not so horrible, I guess.
We should play that real quick. Give us
What's that?
You should give us a couple of questions. Play the game. Name that racist.
Oh, okay. Name that racist. Which ones did I do? Okay. Here's one. This baseball team owner, once referred to two of her outfielders as $1 million niggas.
Cincinnati Reds. Whatever her
Hard
name.
shot.
Hard shot.
Yes.
Oh, where's my bell?
That's what happened. I hit the bell. When we get it right, I have a bell.
We're talking about Eric Davis at the time. Is that Eric Davis?
I think so. I think that's right. Yeah. Oh, and the other thing is when I go full in and I pull out the phone, it's not connected to anything, but still, it's like I do that. So yeah, that was good. That was good. Yeah, definitely Margot shot. Yeah. So I do that with them, and they entertain my madness. So then when it came time to do the sequel to Hell at the Way Station, we found another place. We found this Black-owned tea shop on Nostrand Avenue, and it's named Brooklyn Tea, so that's why the second book is named Hell at Brooklyn Tea. And it's kind of the same thing, only this time Kirk is also a character, and he has a couple of stories in there as well.
Awesome, man. As we wind down, one last quick question. If you thought vampires existed anywhere for real, where do you think that might be in the world?
Oh, in the world. I would almost say Congress, but I don't want to insult vampires like that.
Great answer.
Ghouls.
We want to see these. We want to see these on the big screen. I think they deserve to be. They've got all the elements, man. They've got everything. It's all there, man. I mean, how is that not even happened? Is that happening?
Things optioned or made?
There's been a couple of conversations here and there. It's been tough, and honestly, chasing that while I'm also, running back and forth doing this, stage managing this show, that show. I mean, it's been hard. And there's a lot of other kids now snipping at my heels. There's a lot of people with graphic novels out, and shit, if I could draw, that would be a whole other kind of thing. But hope springs eternal, guys. It's like I just gotta have the right conversation with the right person, and I figure I'm off to the races.
I figure that it is time, because it's never been more time for this. We need it. That's all else. That's where I'll leave it with.
Oh, brother, your beard to God's ears. That's all I gotta say.
Real quick, so that we've been doing it lately. Every episode that we're asking guests to help us provide a playlist of music for each episode. We usually have a little feed that goes on. Is there any that you would like us to throw down? We usually make it about an hour long of a set list of music. Do you have a couple that you would? I'll throw a couple of this and a little of that there. But what are some of your some music that either inspired you for who you are, or stuff that you just really love?
Let's go with stuff that I just really love. I'm gonna throw in a little DMX.
Okay. After
Party Up, just cause. I'll throw in just because I had, and it was odd that you bring this up, because I was just listening, just needed to hear this song for some silly reason. Message in a Bottle by The Police.
Oh, geez.
Like, I don't know why that came up, but it just did.
There you go.
I know nobody was expecting that, especially after DMX. I would say And just to round it off, a little Avenged Sevenfold, Nightmare.
Okay.
Nice,
you go.
man. Those tracks will make it on the playlist.
Well, all
Sweet.
on the list. I was gonna throw on some Tangerine Dream, maybe a little something else from the 1970s, from a couple of those horror films that we talked about. A little bit of Goblin from Suspiria.
Pete, would
I
you
like
go
that.
with the Little Vampire Weekend?
Vampire Week.
You know me too well, George.
motherfucker. Jesus Christ.
He gets SVP. It's every time. I mean, last week it was Summer of '69. All of a sudden, I was a big fan of Summer. Brian Adams,
The Canadian rock star, Pete.
That's funny.
SVP, we really appreciate your time, and yeah, I think you've got a fresh approach to a genre that's meaningful to it's since film and books have been written. So I definitely look forward to
Thank you.
seeing your books visually. So yeah, keep at it, and I'm interested in learning more myself. So thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
He needs that
Thank you,
because
George. Roger.
he does. George doesn't read, so that's why he needs it on the big screen.
And the audiobook, man.
And the audio.
Those audiobooks.
You know what? That reminds me. I have to call somebody who's supposed to be working on audiobook stuff. Actually,
Would you read
see where the hell he is?
have somebody else do it?
I don't know. It's like I could, I guess. It's like I don't know. I've heard other people read my stuff and been like, oh, like, well, damn. So I don't know. I'm open to various scenarios.
Excellent.
dude, my brother. Thank you very much, man. It was really great seeing you,
best host.
catching up, and I think our internet is just all wonky all around. But if you can hear me, I thank you, man. Roger's awesome, dude. Roger's gonna take us out, and we will have all of your information on the post. We get a little artwork going for these things, and can't wait to release it, man. And just further let the people know about Steven Van Patten.
No, dude, fellas, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Had fun.
Absolutely. That was a wonderful episode. Thank you, Mr. Steven Van Patten. Make sure to check out his novels at LaughingBlackVampireProductions.com or BrookWatersCurse.com. Get you at the same place. Check out all the self-publishing books that he's been writing now. Well, you got 6 novels and several different and a book on marijuana. I love it.
Yep.
And as that is the end of our program, I want to thank all of you listeners for being a loyal fan base at $5 Buzz. Please remember to hit subscribe on YouTube or on Spotify or on Apple. Thank and like us. And if you have any comments, questions, any ideas for future episodes or guests, please email us at $5buzz.com. And that's FIVEDOLLARBUZZ@gmail.com. And we'll get back to you just as soon as we're done sucking somebody's blood. Thank you very much and have a great day.